Hi, I'm Jasmine Walls, and I'm in the garden.
Let's explore creative minds at the panel garden. See what blooms, see what we find at the panel garden. Writing film and art, and worlds apart. So let's start uncovering the thoughts behind the things we enjoy all the time.
Hi, Jasmine. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I just want everybody to know that Jasmine is the most patient guest we have ever had. There have been 5 reschedulings at this point, and you've just been so awesome. And we're recording this the day after Thanksgiving just to give you an idea of how much of a hero this person is. So, I wanted to talk about your latest book, which is...
It's really, the last session, yeah.
It's so cool.
Thank you.
I love the topic. I love the diversity of the cast. I love the storytelling devices. How does a book like this sort of happen?
Well, in this particular case, I was reached out to by Mad Cave Studios and my editor, Mike, who had kind of a really bare bones idea of a group of friends who get together with this D&D game. And it's a bit of a half action adventure, half slice of life. And they presented it to me and they said, would you be interested in working on a book like this? And then once I said yes, they gave me a lot of free reign to kind of go nuts with the actual details of the plot, which they gave me so much freedom. And maybe they shouldn't have, but I had a lot of fun with it.
That is so cool. And the art is done by Dozer.
Yes.
Who has worked on, believe it or not, Dozer happens to be my kid's favorite comic book artist.
Really?
Yes, I told her. I told her we're gonna have we're gonna have them on the show later, and she was really excited, and she's really excited about this book too.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah, Dozer is just such a good artist.
So you've written a few things now, and the question I like to ask writers, especially, is. What makes for a good collaboration? What makes it pop, I guess?
Ooh. I mean, first of all, you've got to have that kind of vibe. You really got to have a story that the art style and the writing style match up. If you've got a really goofy story and a really serious art style, it's not really going to work. Or if you have a really serious art style and really goofy art to go with it, it's kind of tough. So Mad Cave did a really good job of pairing us up. I actually had no idea who I was working with until I had already written the pitch for the plot. But once I saw, I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. It's like winning the jackpot. It was so cool to get to work with Dozer. But to actually make it work beyond that, you have to be really, it's not just writing a script and having an artist come in and draw it. It's way more co-collaborative than that. You're working together to create something. So, if the artist is having a hard time with something, you can't just say, oh, I wrote it like this, you have to do it. That's not, I mean, you can do that, but you won't have a very good reputation. You gotta say, okay, well, if say you have an artist that says, listen, I love your story. I hate writing crowds. You have 5 crowds on your page. You know what? As a writer, you should be like, yeah, it's probably not a great thing to have to draw. You have to be really aware of what kind of struggles your artist is going through and try and adjust your writing style so that it's fair to the both of you. So you're not overworking your artist and, add some things like if there's something they really like, if you have an artist who, bless their soul, if they love car races for some reason, they really want to draw those, maybe see if you can kind of sneak one of those in there or have that be part of the plot. I really like to kind of connect with the artist at the beginning of a project and say, hey, what are you excited about? Let me make sure that this script is just as fun for you to work on it as for me. It's not my book that you've drawn. It's our book together. And I think that is something that sometimes a lot of newer creators or even say like a lot of writers who aren't used to who maybe don't draw themselves don't really think about, and I wish they would think more about, because I feel like a lot of the kind of tension between artists and writers could be solved if they really had it like a nice sit down chat beforehand.
One element of this book that I think is really novel is that it is aggressively inclusive. Um, I think this is probably maybe only the second or third comic I've ever read where I felt like it's saying, wow, this is for you. You're
Hmm.
welcome here.
Hmm. I feel like the way you said is very good. I am aggressively inclusive. And I know a lot of people might say, just, write what comes naturally, but we are definitely affected, whether we realize it or not, by the media we already consume. That's why you have a lot of times you'll have people who are people of color who, when they make media, without even realizing it, might have an entirely white cast without even having it be something they think of, because we're affected so much by the media we consume. So when I create a story, I actually work really hard to make it as inclusive as possible. I say, okay, how can I have all these elements that are in not in a way that it feels like I'm ticking off boxes either. That's something that annoys me, is when you have a piece of media and it feels like a character was just added in because they wanted it to seem inclusive. I want everyone to be really full-fledged characters, but I want them to be people you might run into in real life. I don't want a cast that's all white. I want a very inclusive cast. I want a lot of body diversity, and I want a lot of different backgrounds that really add to the story rather than just being set pieces.
And in addition to like the ethnic diversity and the body diversity, um, the characters' pronouns in the story.
Oh yeah.
A lot of them are non-binary, and
Mhm.
it is. It, I wouldn't call it a queer story per
Mhm.
se, but there are a lot of queer characters in it.
Yes. One of the ways, because I wanted to have a very queer cast without making it be their primary, character trait. So the way we did that was we just started the whole story out in a GSA club. We're gonna make this real simple for y'all. They're all queer. You may not know the exact shade of queer, but they're all in there, and we made it. It is a part of their story because it's a part of their life, but it's definitely not their defining traits. And like you said, it's not necessarily a queer book, but it is a book full of queer characters.
Well, the funny thing about the GSA thing is that I think absolutely everybody has been through that. You go into a GSA club meeting, and the organizer or isn't there. Nobody think and but I've never had that spark. To say, hey, let's start a D&D game, which is sort of what happened in the book,
Yeah.
and that was they just took something so relatable and turned it into just something really cool. I thought.
Yeah. It was a really fun way to kind of introduce everybody. It was, I was thinking back to my high school days where, you go to these clubs and you think they're going to be really cool, and it's just another student who has no idea what they're doing. Half the time, they don't show up either.
Yeah, yeah. It's true. It's true because that's like always the way it goes too. Like
Hmm.
it was just mwah, it was wonderful. Oh boy. So do you have a personal history playing D&D and long form role playing games?
I do. I love tabletop RPGs. I'm not a big video game person, but like, you tell me I get to build a character and we're going to roll dice, I'm already sitting at the table. I love them so much. I've been playing since I was 16 or so. In high school, I had a group of friends who introduced me to it, and it was a slippery slope. I've never come back from, and I don't really want to. It's so much fun. Um, so I've been playing on and off ever since high school, and now I'm 31, so it's quite a few years in there, full of just nonsense stories, and I've built so many friendships off of it.
That is amazing. So as you're writing and you've got like just an amazing cast of characters you're working with, but they all sound really unique. Where do your characters find their voices?
I like to build a cast that's going to be sort of balanced with each other, and then as I'm writing them, they sort of develop their own voices. So it usually takes me about one or two drafts to really kind of really lock in on the voices that they're going to have for the whole story. But once they're there, then I'm like, okay, all right, now we're in the groove. But yeah, it's a little bit of planning, a little bit of letting the characters speak out, and saying like, how would this person with this particular background react to the situation, and then kind of building on top of that.
Awesome. I am a little bit off script right now, so I have to pull up the script, and
No worries.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We're going full improv.
You are seriously like the best guest, and I just think you're charming.
Thank you.
So, as a writer, is there an emotional place that you like to create from?
Oh yeah. As a writer, I really like creating stories that don't shy away from difficult issues, but also feel joyful. And I know it's kind of a balancing act, because it's so easy to tip into the place of like, let's use our trauma, and tell stories from there. Let's just make this tragic and dramatic. And I really like stories that have happy endings and that feel joyful, but you're still going to be working through these real life problems. And that's how I work through a lot of stuff personally. And I like to sit in that kind of like, yeah, things are hard right now, but we're going to get somewhere good afterwards. And that helps me a lot. And that's kind of the emotion I always strive for in the stories I'm telling and in real life. So I like to kind of keep that going. I feel like it's so easy to fall into the despair, especially everything going on in the real world. I like stories that kind of touch on that and say, hey, we recognize that, but like, we're going to move towards something better. We're not going to let ourselves kind of sink into that.
Does the existence of digital distribution change the way you think about writing stories?
Yes, in some ways. I love the idea of digital distribution because I think it's the most accessible, especially in the world of comics, because a lot of people don't necessarily have a local comic shop, or even, if they're not involved in the community of comics. I like the idea that, people are there's a lot of webcomic readers, and there's a lot of people who can access things digitally that they could not get physically. And I think it's a fantastic step forward in any form of storytelling. Mad Cave, one of the things that I was really excited about is that Mad Cave was offering digital issues through their website, so that even if you missed the pre-order, if you couldn't have a local comic book shop to order through, you could get the digital issues, and then they would mail you the trade copy at the very end. And as someone who loves comics but hates having to like store a bunch of floppies everywhere, I like getting the trades, but I don't, once I have the trade, I don't need 6 issues of, something else sitting around that isn't necessarily easy to share or recycle.
Exactly.
So yeah, I was really, really excited about that. So I think it's a fantastic, fantastic step forward.
I started reading digital, and I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm realizing that, hey, wait a minute, I don't have to put these anywhere. I don't have to, have a box full of digital comics, and I could have like literally as many as I want anywhere I go, and it is the best thing ever, I think.
Yeah, I love getting a physical book, like the trades, but I always want to support the team and make sure that they know that it's something that we want. And usually the way to do that is to purchase the floppies. So being able to do those digitally has been a big relief.
Mad Cave is just such an awesome company. Overall, they do so much cool stuff. I had Mark on my show, and he was one of the most charming guests I've ever had.
Oh, nice.
It was so cool. What has your experience been like working at Mad Cave?
My experience has been fantastic. I had such a great team to work with. It was, my editor was a huge help in fixing. It was my first time working on a serialized story versus just a straight graphic novel. And they have a different approach you take to the storytelling where you kind of have to have almost like a mini arc every issue. And it was a little bit of an adjustment period, and Mike was a huge help in making sure that went smoothly and helping me kind of find my voice in that sense. And also just whenever I emailed and said, hey, can we add this in? It's a little crazy, but like, I think it'll be fun. Almost every single time Mike was just like, yeah, why not? Let's go for it. So a lot of the stuff that you see in this comic that you might not see in other comics is due to the fact that the editors were super open to letting me do pretty much whatever. And just awesome. Giving me far too much power as an author. And then, working with Dozer, who's just, killing it every single issue. It was just a dream team. And working with them, they've been really good at communicating. And, I can only speak for myself, but I had a really, really good time working with them. Yeah, it feels like a company that loves comics.
Do you have a favorite kind of story to tell?
Genre-wise, or
just in general?
I guess I kind of touched on it when talking about the emotions. I really like stories that are hopeful. Okay. And that can be in any genre, but if I was going to be more specific, I love stories I love action and comedy, and I love history. And I love alternate history. So like speculative fiction, weird histories, things like that. I feel a lot of them go towards a dark way. And like, it makes sense. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do with that. But I I love Westerns, which people often don't expect. Yeah. A lot of people just don't expect me to come out and say that. But I love Westerns, and I hate most Westerns because I love the aesthetics and I love the vibe and I love a lot of the tropes, and I can't stand how awful a lot of them are, not just in quality, but in content, it's very racist, very sexist. But it has so much potential, and I am so ready for a Western revival. So yeah, I love any genre, really. I'm big on, if you love telling stories, you can tell any kind of story, but definitely, I like stories that tend to touch on some heavy topics in a way that is, not depressing, sure. And has a really hopeful vibe and a really hopeful ending.
That is amazing. That is awesome. Also, it's the quirkiest answer I think anyone's ever given me for that question.
Oh, nice.
Did I ask this already? But did I ask what is your origin story?
My origin story? No. But I love that question.
Thank you.
My origin story. Ooh, it's a bit of a winding road, so I apologize if I go on for a bit.
That's what this is all about.
I actually started as a baker.
Really?
Yeah, I went to culinary school, and my goal was to own my own bakery, which I did end up doing. But I was only about 22 or 23, and it was, things were getting successful, and business was picking up, and I had this moment of like, if I do this, I'm going to commit all my time, money, and energy to this, and there's so much I still want to do, so I made a really hard choice, and I closed my business after a year. And after that, I was like, well, it kind of drifted for a bit because I'd been working on that goal for so long. And I was like, well, what do I want to do with myself? And I was like, my other great love when I was deciding what to go to college for was comics. And I was like, maybe I should kind of dip my toes back into that. And so I began really, and I'd always been reading comics and enjoying them and kind of drawing still, but that's when I got serious about looking into like the actual form of writing and making sure that writing is a skill that I was developing, not just, coming up with stories, but making sure those stories were actually good. and it's something I became really, really passionate about. So I began drawing my own comics. And then later, I'm a very slow artist. So I hired some people to do some short comics, about 4 or 5 page ones. And it kind of built from there. And I just began making friends and connections and, teaming up with other creators and having a ton of fun and just slowly building to the point where occasionally people email me to write stories. And it's really cool.
That is really cool.
Well, thank you.
What makes for good comic book storytelling?
I think you have to be really aware as a writer that you are not simply writing a story, but that a good majority of that storytelling is visual. So you need a lot less exposition because you can literally show what you're not telling. And that's something to keep in mind is you need to brevity is going to be strong for you in this medium. You don't need a ton of dialogue. You need just enough to make your story impactful. And a lot of it can be expressed through body language, through the setting, and, take advantage of that visual medium. There are things you can do in comics that are so visually impactful that don't quite hit the same in novels. And there are things that you can write in comics that you're not going to quite get the same impact in something like a movie, which is entirely visual. So really, if you can find that balance, you can do so many cool things. And that goes back to working with your collaborators is find out what your artist is really passionate about, what their strengths are, and make sure you can tell when an artist is having fun on a book. So if you make sure your artist is having a good time, then your book's it's only going to be better. So it's really all about teamwork and being aware of, all the benefits you have in this medium and just going nuts with them.
Nice. So can you think off the top of your head of a comic book that shaped you as a person?
Oh, goodness. I think the problem is there's so many. I get this question every interview, and every interview my mind goes blank. Just because I always...
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. I always feel like I'm going to miss 10 people and feel really bad about it. There's so many comics that shaped who I am. What got me into comics was a lot of the old school European ones because my mom so my mom's Belgian and she grew up on those. So she has a huge collection of Asterix and Obelix and Tintin and Lucky Luke and all those. So that's what I grew up on. And then after that, my brother was really into it, Marvel and DC comics. And, I kind of got into those as well. And then manga, of course, the entirety of my middle and high school years is consumed by manga and anime. So all of those kind of combined into, there are elements of each that I really liked and sort of really built my passion for comics. And then once I started making my own, I really got into the indie comic scene and less big presses. You'll have Oni Press, you've got Lion Forge back before it was part of Oni. You had a lot of people doing web comics. All those ones are really pushing the envelope in the way that the big companies are often not doing. And that's what really got me into comics as a storyteller and was oh, okay, we can really push the envelope and do some really cool stuff.
Do you remember the first time a comic book made you cry?
Oh gosh. That's a hard one. I'm not an easy crier. Usually it's movies that get me to cry. I think it's the music. There's a sad scene and that music kicks in and I'm oh, here come the waterworks.
There you go.
Yeah. And that's always a touching family scene, siblings reunite or, of course, if a pet dies, there's I would just, it's just waterworks left and right. I will say you know what? I will say a comic that made me laugh. I love comedy, but it's hard to make me laugh out loud. And one of the comics that just cracked me up from start to finish is a web comic called Sakana by Mad Rupert. And that one was the first time, and it's done as strips. And that was probably the first time I laughed really hard all the way through. And that one, and along with the Kate Beaton's history comics. I love history and I love satirical history. And she has a book called Step Aside Pops and Hark a Vagrant. Oh my God. Some of the funniest historical satire I've ever read.
So who's the most inspiring creator in comics?
Oh God. That's a hard one because everyone's going to be inspired by something different. And there are so many creators that I'm like, I find this really inspiring in this one way, and another one really inspiring in another. So it's hard to narrow that one down. We have Olivia Steffens, who just put out Artie and the Wolf Moon, which I think was a really big one for me because it has an entirely black cast and it's werewolves and it's just like a fun family adventure. It's also got queer characters. Yeah, and I find that really inspiring because it's not often you get to see a fully black cast that isn't about racism.
Yeah,
it's just, each creator's got their own focus. It's going to be really inspiring for a specific reason. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think we'll go with Olivia for as a fellow Black creator being really inspiring.
Well, it looks like we're up against the end of the show. Are you ready for the fun part?
Okay. This is already fun, so I'm excited.
All right. So these are the questions that I asked that some of them are goofy, some of them are deep, and I'm just going to sort of left you with them. See where we go.
Duck and weave.
Okay. So, which Ninja Turtle do you see yourself as?
Probably Donatello.
There you go.
Yeah. I often am like if I'm remembering my Ninja Turtles right, Donatello's purple, and I'm kind of the mediator of my family a lot of the time.
There you go. So if you had a security belt, or not I keep saying security belt, it's utility belt, sorry. But if you had a Batman style utility belt, but it was made of items that are relevant to your life and career, what would you put in it?
Ooh, chocolate. I would absolutely have like a whole little hot chocolate kit. It's one thing I'm really well known for is being really kind of a hot chocolate connoisseur, also being deeply judgmental of bad chocolate.
I've only known you for like 40 minutes, and I love you already.
Yeah, so definitely like a whole hot chocolate set. I would have to negotiate my way out of pretty much every other situation. I'm also the mom friend, so I definitely always have things like hand wipes and a little like snack bag. That's probably what I'd have in my utility belt. Maybe a pocket knife. That's about it.
That's amazing. So what inspires you?
Things that make you feel, which is a super vague answer, and I apologize for that. But like things that, you leave it and you keep thinking about it, whether it being like, oh, that was a really I don't write horror, but I do, oftentimes I'm editing horror stories, and it's something that kind of lingers with you, makes you think, and you're like, okay, either because that was creepy and I'm going to be up all night, or like, oh, it really brought up a lot of things that, I haven't thought about. Or something that makes you feel really hopeful or happy, even if it's like, I love a lot of B movies, like really bad ones, just because they're fun. Like I like stuff that, it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to think too deep about it, but like, it was fun.
What criteria do you have when you're thinking about looking for a minion or a sidekick?
I would say someone who's not too stuck in their ways. Like if I have a sidekick, they're there to help me with my ideas. My ideas are always going to be already kind of wacky, so they need to take it to the extreme. Like if I say we're going to blow up the moon, they're like, why just stop at the moon? Let's figure out a way to take out like 3 other planets. And I'm like, you know what? I'm a villain. That's a good point. I need a good hype man.
Exactly. And blowing up the moon is only the start of the fun, really. I mean, if you think about it.
Exactly. It's going to be the opening.
Totally. Oh, that's great. That is great. So where do you find joy?
Oh, in anything I can. When I was a teenager, I remember I was really angry at everything for no good reason. My life was perfectly fine. I was just an angsty teenager. And I remember I hit a point and I was just like, this is a miserable way to live. This is not fun. It's not fun for me. It's not fun for anyone around me. And I was just like, how about we try something different? And I decided to just be a little more positive. And it was a long journey. Like, it was not a switch, but it was something I was like, if being miserable all the time, as legit miserable, wow, shocker, let's try being positive. Maybe life will feel more positive. So I actively try and find joy in as many things as I can. In stories, in the world around me. And it sounds like a Hallmark card, but it it's something that I do actively try and do. I try and find the good in whatever situation I find myself in. And it has helped, there's not always a good, there's not always a silver lining, but when there is and you find it does help to get through a lot of the dark places.
Congratulations. You've just defeated Thanos. You now have the Infinity Gauntlet in your possession.
Oh, snap.
And at your whim, you can change any aspect of reality or the universe or whatever. You've probably got a huge list of things you would do with it. But what's that first thing that comes to mind?
The first thing. I think I would increase everyone's empathy. Yeah. I think a lot of the reasons that we have a hard time connecting with people and why it's so easy sometimes, well, not easy, but it is so common to sort of dehumanize people we don't know personally or consider other, is because unless that person is talking to us, unless that person is right in front of us, it can be hard to empathize with them. And I feel like we could do a lot better about being more empathetic towards people that we don't necessarily know personally or see on a daily basis. And so that, I could wish for a lot of things, but that would probably be my first one is empathy.
So what's next for the amazing Jasmine Walls?
Career-wise, I've got a few projects I'm working on that I'm not allowed to talk about, but I am very excited about Brooms, which has been announced, so I can talk about that one. And it's coming out in 2023, and I am so incredibly excited. It was the first major graphic novel that I wanted to work on, and one of the first ones that I pitched. And I pitched it with Teo Duvall, who is a stunning artist, who is just the coolest person. And we got really lucky, and we had an editor who was super excited about this book. And it's in production. My job is mostly done. I'm mostly, backing up the artist, helping it out however I can on that end. And the pages are looking gorgeous. So I've been very, very hyped about that in secret. Yeah, I'm super excited. It's about a group of young women who are living in an alternate world it's the 1930s Mississippi, in a world where magic exists. Except, it's 1930s Mississippi, so a lot of other problems also still exist. And so these girls are taking part in illegal broom races to earn money to move to somewhere better.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that one. It's going to be... It's
cool.
It's halfway between a magical girl team up and like an underdog sports story.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
No, thank you.
So, Jasmine, I wanted to thank you for making the time and dealing with all my crazy scheduling.
No, that's fine.
just coming on my humble little show. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
So where can people find you online?
They can find. I'm most active on Twitter at MythJ Comics, MythJae Comics on Twitter. I also have a website, which is my name, is JasmineWalls.com, and that's where you can see like all the comics that I worked on, all my older short comics that you can read for free. You can see all the books that are being published recently. Everything's listed on there. I have an Instagram. It's also MythJ. It is not very active. But if you prefer Instagram, you can follow me there.
And now it's time to go. Wasn't that fun? The Panel Garden is a show about the things we love. It's produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis and Tyler Scott. Closing theme by Mikey Flash of Speed Force Music. The credits are read by the awesome and talented Kat Bertano. That's me. And if you're feeling super generous, feel free to go to buymeacoffee.com/EvaIsAdorable. There, you can support what we do by chipping in as little as $1. Not financially able? That's okay. Shares on social media and reviews on your favorite podcast listening platforms help us a ton. And that's it, babies. That's all we got. Thank you for being awesome, valid, and perfectly gorgeous. We couldn't do this show without the love and support of the amazing people who listen. That's you. Join us next time for another death-defying adventure in cyberspace. Bye!